also joined tonight by our Deputy Incident Commander, Mark Quinlan, from our Electric Operations Organization. For people who are on the phone who might have questions, you can certainly dial 415-973-5930, which is our media line. You can ask those questions and we will follow up after the press briefing. So with that, I'm going to invite Scott up to do some weather for us, and then we'll hear from Bill.
Thanks, Keith. Scott Steffel, PG&E Meteorology. Well, I wish I could be giving you a forecast on the rain, but that's not what the weather is bringing us. The weather is going to bring us another.
Can you repeat first and last name?
Repeat my first last name. First name is Scott. Last name is Strenfel, S-C-R-E-N, F as in Frank, E-L. I'm a meteorologist at PG&E. Essentially, we have another offshore dry wind event on the horizon. Looks like after a first kind of couple days, today into tomorrow, some breezy north dry winds, we're going to get into a period of heightened weather risk. Essentially, late Wednesday, the 23rd, into Thursday, the 24th, we are expecting a period of gusty, dry offshore winds, a typical Diablo wind event to develop across northern California yet again. This time, we're a little bit later on in the season, so fuels are expected to be as dry, if not drier, than the event we just went through on October 9th through 11th. Again, we're looking at a total California-wide event because as the system drops south, it is going to produce Santa Ana winds across the south half of California on Thursday into Friday. As far as forecasted wind speeds, we're expecting them to reach gusts of about 35 to 45 miles per hour in the Sierra Nevada, generally north of Calaveras County. And then we could see similar gusts in the kind of northern Bay Area, gusts of 35, 40 in general over elevated terrain. And kind of on the southwest facing slopes where these downslope windstorms tend to materialize is where we're expecting those winds. In the lower elevations, like your Napa counties, your Sonoma counties, winds down in the valleys are going to be less than that. Over some of the higher terrain, though, in like Mount Diablo, this Mount St. Helena's, the Jarbo Gaps, Big Bend area, in portions of our service territory, we could see gusts 55 or in excess of 55. National Weather Service is actually forecasting some gusts to 60 miles per hour. We do continue to closely coordinate with our agency partners. Starting Friday, we coordinated with the National Weather Service Monterey office on this upcoming storm event. And then every day since then, we've been participating on an interagency call that's led by Northern Operations Predictive Services. That's an interagency forecasting group, essentially the feds especially. Essentially all meteorological entities are aligned that this is another high-risk weather event. And some of the slides that I was going to present to you are some of the forecasts from those federal forecasting agencies. So the slide on to my right shows the Northern Operations Predictive Services forecast, and they're showing a high risk for wind for vast portions of Northern California that encapsulate about 1.4 million of our PG&E customers. This time period is still expected to be Wednesday into Thursday, and the same time period that we're looking at for dry and gusty winds. The National Weather Service has just posted fire weather watches today for similar areas across Northern California, and we calculated that in that geographic footprint of the fire weather watch, it's about 1.2 million PG&E customers in that footprint. So we will continue to kind of monitor the weather forecasts as they arrive. We're getting global and also our high-resolution local weather model multiple times per day, and we'll continue to monitor that. We're still about 48 hours out from the start of the event, so there is a chance for things to evolve a little bit as weather and weather forecasts are quite dynamic in nature. And so with that, I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Bill Johnson. Pardon me, the President and CEO of PG&E. I'll provide a brief operational update regarding the planning of this potential public safety power shutoff later this week, and I'll also address the improvements we're focused on since our previous safety shutoff about 2 weeks ago. First, a reminder of why we do this, a reminder of why we and the other California utilities, and actually now many utilities across the West, initiate public power shutoffs at all. And a simple answer is safety. The sole intent is to prevent a catastrophic wildfire caused by a spark from electrical equipment. In high winds, electrical equipment is more susceptible to damage, including that from trees, branches, and other flying objects. And damage of this nature can cause sparks. And with high wind and dry conditions and plenty of dead and dying grass and trees, our communities are at much higher risk for rapid fire spread. So that's what we want to avoid, and we're serious about that. Remember, damage during high winds is possible, even though our equipment in high fire threat areas meets or exceeds standards. We inspected all that equipment earlier this year. We fixed all high priority issues. And the issue in California is that more and more of our service area is considered by the state to be at high fire risk. In fact, 3 times more of our service area is at high risk of fire than was the case 7 years ago. About 15% in 2012, more than 50% today. And that service area is roughly 70,000 square miles, so that is a big area. So we're really dealing with a new reality here. And power shutoffs are one tool we have to keep the community safe and combat this risk. It's not a tool that we want to use. It's certainly not a tool we like to use. It runs against the grain of why most of us ever got in this business. And we do understand it creates hardship and comes with its own potential safety issue for others. But again, we've seen catastrophic wildfire recently, California, Southern California last week. There was another one this morning, I think. And we're just determined to not let that happen here. So let's move to how we're preparing for this week's wind event. Given the forecast, we're looking at potentially turning off power to approximately 200,000 customers in parts of 16 counties. Counties are largely located in the Sierra foothills and the North Bay. Parts of Mendocino County are potentially included, as well as parts of San Mateo County. So we began proactively contacting potentially impacted customers this afternoon, 48 hours ahead of the event, by phone, email, and text. So this means if you do not receive a notification from PG&E, you are not currently in the area we anticipate turning off the power. Other than parts of San Mateo County and some of Napa and Sonoma counties in the North Bay, we do not expect shutoffs in the remainder of the Bay Area. In terms of what's next, as Scott said, we'll continue to monitor the forecasted wind event and update our customers and communities accordingly. Over the next day or so, we will determine if and exactly where we will turn off the power, depending on how weather conditions change. Once the winds subside, we give our Army of Field personnel the all clear, which means they can begin inspecting power lines and other equipment in the impacted areas. We repair any damage from the wind that we find, and then we turn the power back on. And that's not just as easy as throwing a switch and turning the power on. So we'll make every effort to restore power within 24 to 48 hours from the time the weather has passed. So for our customers' planning purposes, we suggest preparing for outages that could last up to 48 hours. Possibly longer, depending on the extent of the storm and depending on what conditions and damage happens, but I think preparing for 48 hours is a good choice. So let me wrap up with how we're doing things differently from previous PSP events based on our lessons learned. First, to prepare for a higher volume of our website, all visitors to pge.com will be redirected to a temporary site with all the critical information on PSPS. This includes an address lookup tool to confirm whether your address is part of the potential shutoff, as well as an outage map and downloadable maps for city and county leaders. As I said, if you're one of the approximately 200,000 customers potentially affected, we have and will continue to notify you directly. Other improvements, our call centers will be focused on emergency and PSPS calls only. Currently have 380 agents available and wait times are about 2 seconds. For the community resource centers that we would open during a PSPS to provide device charging, restrooms, and heating, air conditioning, we're working to acquire sites that are accessible to all customers And we're working closely with county and city governments to determine the best location of those centers. And we will post the locations and hours if we move forward with a safety shutoff. Finally, we're also working to strengthen coordination with government agencies, in particular counties, cities, and tribal governments. We have established a single point of contact for each county. We have a dedicated agency helpline monitored 24/7 for special requests from counties and tribes. And we're offering each county a remote or on-site mapping specialist to provide more real-time information and technical support. And all of this is done with customers and community safety front of mind. Now, we don't want to turn off the power, but if we have to do so, we want to help people stay safe during the shutoff. We want to keep them informed, and we want to turn the power back on as quickly as we can and as safely as we can. Those are our commitments to our customers and the public, and with that, we'll be glad to take your questions.
I'm going to invite Mark up, our Deputy Incident Commander, and we'll have Scott up here also. So we have microphones, we have mic runners that will come to you, so who has a question here?
Sorry, what's the new information?
Hold on for 1 second.
Scott was here at KCBS Radio. What's the new information from earlier today? You said that there were going to be 200,000 customers and you announced where they potentially were going to be the shutoff. So what's new about that? Did you just announce?
We're still at about 200,000 customers in 16 counties. We're monitoring that. We will scope that down as much as we can. But on that count, we're about in the same place. 16 or 50? 16.
16 total. We added one county, which is Alpine County, with about 200 customers, so that's an update. Okay.
Yeah, hi, Kate Larson with ABC7. Last time we spoke, Bill, you told me that I could ask you again the next time you were here, and here we are, about what more you're doing to help the communities. I just got off the phone with Dr. Karen Refusio with the Napa County Health Department, and she would like to know, since your list, your medical database is about a fraction of the federal database for folks who need power for medical equipment, that your list is much smaller than theirs. What are you doing to help these people who maybe can't get to one of your centers to get power, to get air conditioning? Are you going to be actually providing shuttles, for example, to help people to safety? Because there are county health officials all over the Bay Area, not just Napa County, who are worried about their medically fragile folks and how they're going to actually deal with a prolonged power shutoff. So what is PG&E actually doing, physically doing, to help people to safety?
So I'm going to invite Lori Giamona, our Chief Customer Officer, to come up and address this question.
Thank you for the question. So we are working, we're going to be coordinating with the county agencies to provide support. We've been working with Cal OES and with California Foundation for Independent Living, and they've been sending emails out to customers asking what support they need, that the power shutoff is coming. So we're going to be working through those agencies and through the counties to provide support for either transit for customers or hotels if necessary, or batteries if necessary. So we're going to be coordinating with the county.
Okay, are you guys going to be doing anything to update your medical database so that it includes more the people who actually need electricity for their, whatever their medical requirements are?
So the way that our medical baseline customers are qualified is it's actually a rate classification, so a special rate that they're on. So we're working with the county agencies, where we're also working with Cal OES to really understand this population. We don't have them specifically identified if they're not on these special rates. So that's where we're going to be coordinating closely with the counties so that we can provide the support necessary.
Joe Vasquez, KPIX. Mr. Johnson, last time I saw you here, you were admitting there were inadequacies. One of the serious criticisms here was that you turned the lights off to too broad an area, or announced it to too broad an area, and the lights were turned out too soon. Has that changed? Will you be able to narrow in on those windows?
So since you asked me that question last time we were together, I went back and looked very hard. Did we turn out the power in too broad an area? And I have to say, we got that right. If you look at where the damage occurred on the system, it's exactly in the areas where we turned off the power. So I think there was a big scope. It was a large event. The original weather forecast said 3 million customers. National Weather Forecast $1.5 million. We got it down under 750,000. So I think the scope was right. Now, we might have turned it off a little quicker than we needed to. And I was just talking to our man here, Mr. Quinlan, we are going to be as surgical as we can and turn it off as quick to the event as we can. But the scope, I think, was correct.
Gene?
Jean Ellie with NBC Bay Area News. The areas that were damaged where you turned off the power, have you been able to determine if these areas were trimmed, if they were areas that you've already addressed with trees?
A lot of them were, we haven't been all the way through that, but a lot of those pictures we showed were areas where we were in full compliance with vegetation management.
And we'll be including that in our 10-day report when that's submitted to the CPC.
Does that mean you need to clear further away from lines?
There are rules and regulations that limit how far you can trim away from lines. And so we're now aggressively trimming, but historically there have been pretty stringent limitations on that.
Bill, we'll go in the back here, just wait 1 second.
That's me. So, Bill, you've been talking about improving communication, and that's your big failure. And by looking at your website and the communication from your communications people, it seems like that failure has continued all day long. At 11:30 this morning, you said it would be 209,000 people. So that means that you had clarified to yourselves what parts of each county would be off, because you got to that number. And yet you waited 5 hours before you gave specific cities and you released that to the news media. Why the 5-hour wait? Plus, on your website, as of an hour ago, you still have Marin County on the list from a 9 o'clock news release, and Marin County was taken off the list at 11:30. So, I mean, that's just part of it. Going to the maps, the only way up until this news release came out to get any specific about what parts of the counties would be out would be go to the general area map and zoom in, which is not necessarily user-friendly to know to go there. It's under additional PSPS resources. But the key thing is, why the 5-hour wait? You knew what parts of the counties, and yet all of San Mateo County, all of Napa County, and all of Sonoma County is worried about a PSPS shutoff, and yet you had this information and you withheld it for 5 hours.
I don't think we withheld anything. I think what we're doing is trying to be precise in our communications. You know, actually the number now is down to 201,000, right? So it gets more precise by the hour. We have a protocol that says 48 hours before the event, we're going to notify officially. And so that, I think, accounts for the difference between what was on the website and later. But we follow that protocol. And as to the condition of the maps, we're putting up the best information we have on those maps. So maybe when we get in the off-season, we can do more with better maps. But where we are now is we're putting up the best information we have.
But with 209,000, you knew which parts of the county, and you still waited 5 hours to release that information. Is that what we can come to expect?
I think you can come to expect when we know specifically, and we have a protocol that says 72, 48, whatever that hour is, that's when we're going to announce it officially. So we knew, we had much more granular information about specifically where when we made the announcement. Next announcement, we'll have more granular information. So just the nature of dealing with a weather event, and the closer it gets, the more precise you can be.
Also, as a follow-on on that, we are committed to working closely with cities and counties and letting them know. So they're not the first ones to find out when we put out a news release. So part of that communications cadence is working with those cities and counties during that time period you're talking about, so that we can come in here, share these numbers with you, and they're well informed also. Tom?
Two things. First of all, when you were at your CPUC hearing, you talked about vegetation management and hardening of the system, as if these were things that could easily be done. These are enormous tasks that probably take years and God knows how much money. Why would you even list something like that when in fact getting the website's a problem? It almost makes it sound like, well, we're just going to promise them everything and we hope nobody catches that. I mean, kind of explain why you would even mention that given the immediacy of this problem that we have for the next 6, 8, 10 weeks.
Well, I don't think having a correct website and doing vegetation management are exclusive propositions. I think we should be able to do both. We have engaged in a massive program this year of inspection and repair of facilities and vegetation management, tree trimming. We currently have 4,500 tree people out there every day cutting trees. These are important things that minimize risk. But the risk that you see from these windstorms, you can trim 50 feet off the right of way, things will still blow into the lines. We have examples of that many times. So these things are important risk reduction tools. They do not in the immediate term reduce PSPSD. That is much more a weather rather than a physical condition thing.
My other question is something that it seems very doable, and it wasn't mentioned much before, and that is that infrared instruments used properly can be used at night to look at the lines and look at the towers and all of that stuff. And they're very expensive, but there are many agencies within the state fire and law enforcement, as well as the National Guard, that have tons of these things. Are you really going to try, if you do have to cut power, to get some of those things out so you can shorten these restoration periods, which tend to be the thing that angers people the most?
Yes, in fact, in this event, we have been looking at the use of infrared so we can work at night. And we just weren't quite there on this event, but I think going forward, that will certainly be part of it. Deliver restoration so you can work during the non-daylight hours, yes.
Will you do that for this one?
Can't do it for this one.
Mr. Johnson, the governor, the head of CPUC, said this last power shutdown was unacceptable. If I'm hearing you right, you said there were problems, but it's going to go on, and you even said in front of that meeting that this is going to go on for another decade. Can you elaborate there? It sounds like there's a disconnect. The people and our elected representatives are saying one thing, and it sounds like PG&E is saying another. And I've heard from talking to customers what the quarters want to do, and I've heard people say PG&E is being arrogant about that. Can you address that?
Actually, I think we're being realistic about it. What I was intending to convey is I thought we had a 10-year period in front of us where we would limit these every year, make them narrower in scope, get out of them more quickly, and eventually get to the point where we would, why 10 years? Well, San Diego started this in 2007. They've had 10, 12 years, and they're still having shutoffs. Edison, shortly thereafter, are still in shutoffs. The program about vegetation management and hardening, those are 10 to 12-year programs. So this just takes a lot of time. I do think you'll see fewer every year. They'll be narrower in scope. But the same thing, at the same time as we're reducing our element of the risk, the fire risk has increased. This is not a static condition. It's dynamic, and the risk gets higher every year. So I just think it takes a period of time, given the experiences of others in this state, to get to that point.
If you're not using,
you mentioned getting more surgical. Is the reduced number of customers affected this week? Is that just because of the weather, or is it because of bigger technology and maybe some of the backlash last time?
No, not the backlash. We scope things according to the weather and our system capabilities. So the small reduction we just talked about from 2009 to 2001 has to do with the configuration of our system. Obviously, over the next day or so, the weather will influence the number, and we will make it as tight as we can.
if you can't use infrared now, how can you hope to reduce the restoration time? Are you adding more people to do the restoration? Are you starting sooner? I mean, it's the infrared which would allow you to go later hours. And so if that's off the map, how can you promise quicker?
Well, compared to the last event, this is a smaller physical scope. We will again have about 6,300 people and 40-some aircraft at our use. And I just think we're getting a little practice at this. I'm not happy about that, but we have learned lessons every time we've done the restoration. So I just think we've gotten to the point. Plus, during the summer, we practiced this. We tabletopped it, we dry ran it in every one of these op centers. I just think we're able to keep bringing that restoration time in.
I'm just actually hoping for more logistical clarity on, now that we're 48 hours out, are you for sure turning off power? And is it to all of the 16 counties and the towns that you guys had in the slides and that you sent out to us? What can we tell our viewers? Because that was part of the problem last time, is folks wanted more specific information on the time and the locations.
So we have not decided to shut off power. We will not make that decision until tomorrow after midday. Sometime in that time, we will do another meteorology run or two and we will make a decision sometime early afternoon tomorrow. And we're hoping that the weather breaks in our favor and we don't have to do this, but that would be the time.
So Tuesday, May 9th.
I'm sorry, Wednesday. I'm going to have a day off. Wednesday.
So the decision will be made when? Tomorrow?
Wednesday.
And let's also clarify, we're talking about a vast swath of northern and central California, so there will be 3 small waves. I don't know if you want to talk to that, Bill.
Let me take a crack at that. Yeah, so, hi everybody, Mark Quinlan. I'm the Deputy Incident Commander for this event, for this operational period. So, as Scott and Bill had spoke, we're monitoring 3 different geographic regions of the PG&E service territory. They're anticipating to receive some high wind activity. From a timing perspective, there's a area of customers that exist in the Sierra foothills, an area of customers that exist in the North Bay, and a very small area in San Mateo County. The start times of when we believe those winds to hit that threshold where we believe it's unsafe vary. So when we speak to when those winds are going to be present in our service territory, we're thinking 1700 hours, so 5 p.m. Wednesday for the Sierra foothills in the North Bay. And then a little later in San Mateo, 2 in the morning on Thursday. So one thing that we need to consider is we need to build in some operating margin time that will give us enough time to actually de-energize the system. Those times that I referenced are really times that we need to have our system in a de-energized state by that time. So we need to start before that time in order to achieve that objective. So in terms of notifying customers in advance of that, we want to notify customers as soon as possible so that they can make plans. We want to notify our county agencies and state agency partners of the same so that they can make plans. So we're looking anywhere from 8 to 12 hours prior to that time is when we want to make that final notification that we're a go for the shutoff. And then from that moment until the actual target time when we're going to be doing the de-energization work, our team works with the meteorology team and constantly monitors the weather conditions. Sometimes weather conditions change. Sometimes there's a delay where we don't have to de-energize. Sometimes we're going to de-energize right on schedule. I think there was a comment earlier about being precise with the number of customers that we de-energize and the timing of same. We do not want to de-energize anyone any earlier than they need to be. Recognize the inconvenience associated with that. Having said that, we want to make sure that we give our crews enough time to facilitate that operation so that we're in a safe state for the winds.
So the final decision on a shutoff for the North Bay and Sierra foothills, to get back to the original question, with the winds coming at 5 p.m. and you needing time to de-energize, that would mean a final decision and a notification would take place when?
Based on where we sit right now, based on weather, I would say in the morning on Wednesday. We would need to start de-energizing in the early afternoon, around 2 o'clock, based on when we anticipate the winds coming through.
So final decision Wednesday morning.
Correct.
Did you say San Mateo County will be notified at 2 a.m. Thursday?
No, San Mateo County, the period of severe winds enters that area of the county at around 2 in the morning. It's a small scope, so we believe that we could start de-energizing around 1 in the morning. But we would notify those customers in advance of that time so that they can make the appropriate arrangements.
When does the wind event end? Thursday night?
The wind event ends, right now, current forecast is noon on Thursday.
When you're thinking about 10 years down the road and power shutoffs every October, theoretically, how are you planning where you're focusing, putting in microgrids? Is there a way, when you say it will be fewer and fewer people, is that part of your grand scheme of planning when you're looking at maps of if we get a microgrid in here, then maybe Napa County doesn't have to be turned off? How is that planning working?
Yeah, so a couple things. First thing, before Michael did, sectionalize it. In other words, making our transmission system operable in smaller lengths so we can, loop around it. Greater precision with meteorology and predictive tools, more weather cameras, all those things. So the awareness of what's happening will be greater. microgrids will play a part in this. And distributed energy resources that go with microgrids. But in the short term, like this year, we're not doing any of that. We're just going to keep going and making sure we keep people as safe as we can. But over the long term, sectionalizing, better predictive tools, microgrids, and I think will require some distributed energy resources.
What does sectionalizing look like for the community of Maverick County? How long does that take?
Here's a sectionalizing expert.
In terms of sectionalizing being part of the design or actually to execute?
Getting it in place so that you can work around this danger but this community doesn't have to be turned off.
Current state of future state.
So current state right now, we have a transmission system and a distribution system, and we look at the footprint of the weather, and we do whatever we can to isolate and reconfigure our system to only interrupt and only shut off certain areas of the power system. Many times we have devices out there that we can use to operate to isolate and pull that in. In some cases we cannot, so that's part of our planning process to identify what those assets are that exist that could use some additional sectionalizing devices. And then our plan is to go out and build that and obtain clearances for those lines, take that equipment out of service on a planned basis, install the new sectionalization equipment, update all of our records, and then that's in place for the next year's fire season. That's an ongoing effort. So it starts with a first tranche, if you will, based on our experiences from this.
Is there a way to quantify number of customers and how long, like, I'm just trying to get an idea of timing. So how long does it take to put that system in that would affect, 9,000 people in Napa County?
I would say we'd have better clarity on that after the fire season, after we can evaluate all our data.
We have put in something like 183 of them this year, continuing to do that. But as Keith said, we have a better idea once we see the data at the end of the season.
Justin, if I heard you right, you said you're going to contact affected customers directly. Is that new from the last event? And if so, can you elaborate on what if there are people who have cell phones or outdated numbers and all that sort of thing?
So we do try to contact every affected customer by phone, by email, by text. And I think we have a very high hit rate on that. So it's the same as we've been doing.
We've got a couple 100,000 people yet this year who updated their contact information. We want people to do that, several times a year, possibly get a new cell phone and want you to update your contact information so we can reach you. Those 48-hour notices that we mentioned have already gone out for the first two tranches. I believe we're holding on San Mateo County because we're not quite at the 48-hour mark yet. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll plan for the same time tomorrow. Appreciate it.